Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Journey Podcast, episode number 138, the Terry Harper Hockey Journey, presented to you by onlinehockeytraining.com. I'm your host, Coach Lance Pitlick. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you won't miss out on any future episodes. If we were all sitting in a room with 100 other random people and someone asks if someone has won 5 Stanley Cups before, the guy that raised his hand from that group, Mr. Terry Harper, is here to tell us his incredible hockey journey. But before we do, if you want to learn more about me, my hockey experiences, what I know, and most importantly, how I've been helping hockey players get really good with a stick and puck, just head on over to onlinehockeytraining.com and gain instant access to my 10-part video series where I'll show you everything. Consider it my gift to you. Lastly, if you live in Minnesota or are visiting the state of hockey sometime soon and want to schedule an in-person off-ice stick skills lesson, I'd love to have the opportunity to show you my little world. Go to sweethockeycoach.com, that's sweethockeycoach.com, and watch the video on the homepage for instructions. Thanks, and I look forward to working with you sometime soon. I've had a lot of former players on the Hockey Journey podcast that have accomplished amazing things in hockey, from winning gold medals at the Olympics, individual league awards, championships, and a Stanley Cup or two. But my next guest, Mr. Terry Harper, has quietly and humbly slipped through the side door, taking the top hockey accomplishment spot on the Hockey Journey podcast, doing so by winning a whopping total of 5 Stanley Cup trophies in his 18-year NHL career. And I want to know how he did it. But remember, when Mr. Harper began his NHL career, it's not like today where there are 32 NHL teams. Back then, in the early 1960s, when he laced up his skates for his first NHL game, there were only 6 teams. So, if you made one of those lineups, you knew you were one of the best at what you did. My job today is to speak as little as possible so we can fully absorb his legendary hockey journey. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Terry Harper to the show. Mr. Harper, welcome to the Hockey Journey Podcast.
Thank you, and I'm honored to be asked to talk to y'all.
Well, thank you. I think it's important to I think it's an interesting story how the small and connected the hockey world is. So how you and I got in touch with each other is a friend of mine who I used to train when he was trained with. He was just finishing high school. His name's Tim Jackman, and he was working at this school, hockey academy, Christian Hockey Academy here in Minnesota. And one of your neighbors, Briggs Orr, was under his tutelage for the last little while. So he suggested he come work with me, and then talked to his dad, and he said, I got a neighbor who I might want to introduce you to. And here we are, Mr. Harper.
Small world, the hockey group, isn't it? That we connect with each other, and what we have in common is the love of the hockey and the people that are involved in the sport.
Yeah, and isn't that the truth? And you never know when those connections are gonna come back into your life. So,
yeah, interesting that you say Orr, that Nate Orr and Briggs, the son, who is how I got to know them, their name was Orr. And of course I jumped at it right away when I heard that. I said, oh, you're related to the old Orr, the great star? And they, I guess just by name only, they said. So, yeah.
Well, great family, and I'm grateful for the connection because I'm looking forward to hearing your incredible hockey journey. And it's not just about what you accomplished when you were with the Montreal Canadiens and winning all those cups, but it's your journey along the way. And the one thing that every interview that I do with former players is, the journey is very, very similar, but it's completely different.
But when it is similar, it usually has to do with some, hardships or some challenge that has faced they had to face. But anyways, so let's get started. I said I wasn't going to talk too much, and here I am talking too much, so I'm done with that. How I like to start each episode is let's rewind the tape. And I told you, I asked you, and I thank you very much, but I don't think we're going to get this into one episode, so I already prepped you for a 2-episode deal. Let's just take our time. I want to go back to 1940, where it all began, where Terry was born. Talk about your family, your friends. Where were you born, and your introduction to hockey and other sports. I think that's a good place to start. Take it away, my friend.
Thank you. I was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, and everybody in Saskatchewan plays hockey in the winter because it's a long, long winter. And I was fortunate enough to have grandparents that lived in the same house as us. And the grandfather, of course, would make a rink in the backyard every year when we were real small, probably when I was under, 8 or by that, after about 8, you start going down to the public rink, and I would play down there. But before that, maybe even younger, until we're about 6, when you went off to the public rink and played. They had all the parks in the city of Regina had rinks in them in the wintertime. And so there was always minor hockey for us to play in. And typically of everybody that played, most of the kids, we would put our skates on at home and skate. We could skate down the roads because they were snow-packed and almost like ice, to the rink, play, and then skate back home and put your feet on the oven, the old wood stove oven, and cry because they hurt because they were frozen solid. Those days, I talk about them, and I was talking to somebody the other day about that, and I said, I got a photo that I got from my sister last time I was in Edmonton, and it's a picture of myself and my brother in a Maple Leaf, Toronto Maple Leaf uniform, and I go, oh, that I can't believe I was ever a Maple Leaf fan. Montreal, the junior team there was the Regina Pats, and they were sponsored by the Montreal Canadiens. So most of us in the city there were really ended up being Montreal Canadian fans, and actually it was the hockey in the city was so connected to Montreal at that time that if you followed through and worked your way up through the minor league, the junior league, and then into the pros, you had to end up in Montreal if you were from Regina. But it was very typical of all the cities out west at that time, and probably a lot of them in Ontario, that one of the 6 NHL teams were like you'd call a sponsor of the team, of the local teams, and so all the players ended up playing in their organization, and there was no draft, so there was no way to get out of their control. So you ended up playing for the team who had ever sponsored you in your area. But I did have this picture of myself and my brother in Maple Leaf uniform that we must have got for Christmas. So I had to show it to the local. I still play here in the hockey league over the adult league, and I had to show the guys the last week that this picture, because it was it was even fun for me to see. And so being from Regina, so then as a kid you play in these parks leagues, and then as you grow or mature a little bit, and the better players end up playing in the Regina Pat organization, which had indoor hockey at the city rink, and it was on Saturdays. So everybody that I grew up with that played, that was, I guess I hate to say better players, but the top players all went to this junior, to the Regina Pat organization, and would play in the Bantam, midget, juvenile, and then the juniors. And I just followed along in that same, I don't know what you call it, same track as everybody else from the Regina. And I'm fortunate enough that it worked out well for me, that I actually got to the NHL through that, through the chance to play in the NHL.
So don't speed up too fast. I don't want to be talking anywhere close to the NHL right now, but we got to remember here, people, we're talking about you're learning how to skate. You can skate on your roads. So you didn't care much about skate sharpening back then, but you grew them tough out there in Saskatchewan. But we're talking about the 1940s where, outdoor ice, just getting to the rink. What are some of the things that we take for granted today that wasn't even invented back then?
Yeah, the big thing there, that a big excitement for us all the time was to get a piece of hockey equipment, like new pads, new skates. As you'll see when I send you this picture, I'm in basically a Toronto Maple Leaf uniform, sweater and socks, and anything you got like that was always a big thrill because you got to actually feel like you were a hockey player.
When you're growing up, I look back at my time when I spent 5 years playing up in Canada for the Ottawa Senators, and I just want you to touch a little bit about kind of a national pastime, Hockey Night in Canada. How much of an influence was that to you growing up, and who did you idolize growing up? Who did you want to be when you got big?
Big time, the Hockey Night in Canada that you're speaking of was the Saturday night Hockey Night in Canada, and they broadcast an NHL game across Canada. And the Toronto Maple Leafs games were the ones that were covered. Montreal wasn't on that, at least not out west. It never came on our radio. Maybe twice during the winter, we'd get a game from Montreal with Danny Gallivan and somebody talking, covering the game, but most of them all came from Toronto. So most of the Western people were Toronto fans at one time or another. But that was basically the culture of everybody in the winter. By the time I was began to play junior hockey, I had met a girl that I dated, and she was from a farm, and they didn't have any power out there, electricity even. And so anytime there was a hockey game on Friday, especially on the Saturday night games, they would hook the horses to the sleigh, and all the people would meet at the house. It was the last one on the power line coming out of town. The power line went out of town so far, and then it didn't. And so anyone that lived out further would all meet back. It would come into this last house, and they would host it, and there'd be full of 20, 30 people there to just listen to a hockey game on the radio.
Yeah, listen to the hockey game, not watching on TV. I mean, that's
no, not watching on TV. It was just to listen to it. Yeah, and they were just. It's just hard to believe how good hockey fans they really were. I mean, that was their whole week, was to go Saturday night and go in there, and it was one of those gatherings where everybody brought a dish too, so you ate and talked, and just a fun time. So basically what I did is I just came along and followed, went from the Bantams, Midgets, Juveniles in the Regina Pat organization. When I started, I was actually a forward, but I had a serious accident, and when I was about 12, 13 years old, and when I came back, I was behind, so I ended up playing defense, and that's how I got into playing defense.
One thing that I read and I heard on doing the research for this is that you had a pretty traumatic experience. You were involved in a fire. Was that what you were just referring to?
Yes, that's what I was referring to. As I say, I was the original terrorist. I was making fireworks, and it didn't actually explode on me, but I was burning the evidence so I wouldn't get in trouble, and that flared the gas that I was using to flared, and so I was very fortunate to live. And it took a long time to rehab back into hockey.
So you look at, again, I just look at, here you were a kid in the 40s. I just had shoulder surgery 7 days ago, and the medical industry was not at the level that it is today. I mean, that had to have been quite the traumatic experience for your family, but a challenge for all of you to get through, because that wasn't something that just went away after a few months. I mean, this was years, wasn't it?
Well, I was 3 months in the hospital, laying on my back, so I had to learn to walk again and start all over pretty much. Yeah, I was so fortunate because it was right after the war, and there was a doctor in Regina who had come. Dr. Slazik was his name, and he's a Polish fellow and had been through all the burns of the war. So he was probably one of the most experienced burn doctors in the world at the time. Like, doctors from all over the U.S. would come and spend a week with him to learn what all his techniques he was using and stuff. And somehow he happened to be the one in Regina, and that's where just like, how fortunate can you get?
Was there any chance that you weren't able to, play sports anymore?
I guess so, and and I've still got problems from it, the burn, the scars tissue, and that. But yeah, I was. But everybody just helped me along the way, and he did a lot of skin grafts so that I could get back my mobility again to my joints, and because the scar tissue won't stretch much. So yeah, I was very fortunate to have that happen, and to have him there. Yeah, I probably wouldn't even have lived if it hadn't been that he was there and was so actively in knowing what to do.
Did you, after you recovered from that, because a lot of people that go through a real traumatic event, they have a different outlook on life. Did that experience change how you viewed the world moving forward?
I don't think so. I think I was too young to have really had an opinion about the world before that, or changed. Yeah, no, I don't. Nothing sticks out in my mind.
One thing that you didn't really talk or go into detail too much about your childhood was, did you play other sports? If you did, and then, I mean, brother, sister, I can't remember you letting us know if you had any brothers or sisters, buddies that you hung out with a lot.
Yes, I had two brothers. I was the three boys and a sister. The three boys, we were a year apart, like 1 year followed each year. So we were all very competitive and very much into sports. Loved football, also loved track and field. Got to try out for the Olympics one time, one of those early years. Not that I ever was capable of going or could have competed, because it was mostly for running. And at the time I said, we ran and we were 100 yards in 10 flat, and the colleges in the U.S. did them in 9.3 or 9.4, something at that time. So it wasn't even close to being able to go, but it was, part of the Canadian thing. So I did get invited to the tryout. Yeah, so I did play football and played, and actually had an offer to play professional football, but didn't take it. It's another one of those great moments in your life. I loved the football, I liked playing, and the end of the summer came along, and I got an invitation to go and try out with the Rough Riders, and And one of my friends, one of my heroes that played on the team was a fellow that was a lineman, had been all pro for 10 years. And he took me aside one day and he said, Terry, I've watched you play hockey, and I've been, as you know, all pro lineman with the Rough Riders for 10 years, and I have to have a summer job to get by. And he said, stick with hockey. So it was great advice. Because that's what I did. I didn't go to the tryout. I just waited for the Montreal Canadian camp and went to my first camp in Montreal, training camp. But it was just super advice and good timing as it worked out.
So as you're climbing the ladder, is when did you have the ignition that you wanted to see how far you could take this hockey thing, you know?
When I was 17, we went to the Memorial Cup, the Regina Pats, and we did really well. And we were 17, we were graduating from high school, and I decided I was going to go to college, that I wanted to go to college, and had gone down into the U.S., and we'd looked at a couple of colleges, stopped another fellow, Gordy Berenson, and myself, and another fellow, Jerry Kolb, that were all on that Pat team that had gone to the Memorial Cup. So we went off to college, and we went to a couple of colleges, and we actually went to North Dakota, and then we went to Michigan, to Ann Arbor, to the University of Michigan, and we decided that we wanted to we'd go to the University of Michigan. So we went home, got our stuff, and went back and started college at the three of us at the University of Michigan, and the Montreal Canadiens called the NCAA and said I had got paid when I was a junior hockey player, and so didn't qualify for the scholarship. Well, the coach in Michigan then was a guy named Al Renfrew. He came, this has probably been in school only a month or so, and the only reason they knew I wasn't coming, it wasn't around in Regina, didn't show up at the training camp when they started training camp, so they tracked it down where I was, and they told the NCAA that I had got paid as a junior. I hadn't really got paid, but what I had to, my parents didn't live in Regina anymore, so the Pats did pay my room and board where I billeted. I never saw any of the money. All it did, so 10 months they paid the $50 to the room and board, so that I had to have 10 months of it because I was parents didn't live there, and my dad's mom said you can't go unless you get the money to pay your room and board for the whole 10 months of high school. And so that's how I ended up getting. I did get money, but not any money that I ever saw. It was just paid to the landlady. And it was kind of ironic because that team that Montreal, the Regina Pats of that year, the kids that were from the town of Saul, from Regina all together, who grew up there and didn't have room and board paid, all got made more money than I did because they split a purse that was leftover money at the end of the year, and they got like $580, and I only got $500. So it was. But then when the NCAA said I was ineligible, the coach in Michigan, Al Renfrew that I mentioned earlier, came to me and he told me what was going on, and he said, you know what? He said, if you want to stay, I'll cover you with a scholarship. You'll have to be my assistant, and you practice every day with us, but you'll never get to play in any games. So. And that's when I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, no, I'm going to go back and make them pay me, make them really pay me best I can, kind of cocky, I guess. But if they're forcing me back, then they're going to pay me. I'm no longer going to be an amateur and play for their, room and board. So that's what I did. I made the decision then that I would try and make it as a pro hockey player, and that I could still go to school in the summertime because the hockey season is short enough that you got lots of summer, which is what I did for 10 years, I guess. I went to college every summer for, that was my summer job. I went to college and then, worked a little bit, but not much, mostly appearances for breweries and things like that to make a little bit of money in the summer. Because we didn't even know we won the cup. We didn't get paid all that much in those days.
So let me, this has to be very uncommon back in that day to be, pursuing your hockey dream, but then in the summers, going and get your degree. I can't think of a lot of, there's not many players that are doing it today. I doubt that there are many doing it back then, but was that uncommon? And
it was very uncommon then. I don't know that there was anyone else doing it then. There probably were, but I just didn't know of it. Yes. Yeah. No, it was a bit ironic about it because I never did get a degree. All I did was ever go to summer school, and I have credits from McGill and from another school in Montreal, and from and most of them are from the University of BC because I went to Vancouver in the summertime, and so but they wouldn't graduate me either with a degree because I never spent a whole winter session on campus at that time. All I ever did was accumulate all these things in the summertime, summer school. That wasn't such a shock to me, but it was a bit of a shock that they didn't want to give me a degree, but it didn't make any difference by then. I kind of had made my mind up what I wanted to do. And when I started this whole thing, I was actually in pre-med. I thought that's what I wanted to do, was go into medicine. But by the time I played in the NHL, 4 or 5 years, I decided I was too lazy. I wasn't going to work that hard to get through medicine. So it wasn't a big shock to me not to have a degree. I was going to do things on my own anyway. I didn't need a degree.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Where did you get, who was pushing you in the academic? Was it your parents?
My family, neither my mom or dad had gone to university. They got interrupted by the war and never did go. I guess one of my uncles did go, and he was a doctor. He had used the military to get a degree, and I guess probably he was my biggest influence. Yeah, but why I wanted to be a doctor was because of him and what he was doing. Yeah,
isn't that I want to go back to hockey now. As you're climbing the ladder, so you were planning on going to the University of Michigan. Do you think that they were mad that you went there and they did that because they wanted you back selfishly?
Oh, yeah, right. That's Montreal Canadiens did it. They're the ones that did it. Yes. Oh, yeah. 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 No, they didn't, because they did. One of the other guys that was there, the fellow Jerry Kolb, same kind of situation, but they didn't do it. They didn't even squeal on him. They didn't tell him that he got paid, and he was the same. He wasn't from Regina, and he got paid the same $50 a month room and board while he was in high school. Yeah, no, it was, they set out to make the Regina Pats wanted to get credit for anybody that would go from there to the NHL, because I think it helped them with their money, in whatever money that the Canadians and the National League teams gave back to these teams that they sponsored, because all the junior teams were sponsored by some of the NHL teams, and most of them was related to the city you lived in. I remember Winnipeg, being a big city, was divided into three. They had Canadians, Rangers, and Detroit or something. 3 different teams owned owned parts of there, but Regina, being a smaller town, was the Pats. There was Montreal Canadiens, and I think Saskatchewan was Detroit, and Edmonton was maybe Detroit and somebody else. It was a little bigger. But they divided. It's like in the east, St. Catharines was Chicago, and Peterborough was Montreal, and all the cities, all the teams, smaller cities where the amateur hockey, junior hockey was played, had been divided up by the NHL, and they owned all the players that ever came out of those places. You just couldn't go somewhere else. You belonged to them.
Well, there has to have been someone at some point that tried to buck the system. Do you remember any player, probably that's going to be a first overall player, that all of a sudden created controversy because he was born and bred and raised in a certain community, but because it wasn't the team he wanted to go with, they ended up doing something strategically to change that? Is there anything like that happen?
I don't think anyone ever was able to do that. They it was a gentleman's agreement amongst the NHL teams, and they didn't want to step on each other's feelings or upset them, and so because I guess if they had gone after a player that didn't come up in their system, then the other team would do likewise, and I guess they felt it just caused chaos. So
I want to go. I'm looking at your stats at Hockey DB. I mean, you were a defensive defenseman. You didn't get a lot of points. How did you get noticed, in being that there's only 6 teams in the NHL? How did you get noticed while rarely scoring? What were you really, really good at?
Well, defense. I specialized in defense. I killed penalties all the time I played, every team I played for. I specialized in defense, and it was very good to me in a lot of ways because sometimes I said, I got through the season without scoring a goal, but I was plus 30 or something, or just had always was a plus player with the for and against. And was able to use that in my later years to get a lot of bonuses. So it did work out for me really well.
So, I mean, okay, you're a good defensive player, you're a plus player, but, were you a puck magnet where you block shots all the time, killing penalties? Did you get in fights all the time? I mean, that the league was a little different back then. It was kind of prison rules.
Yeah, you're right. And I did get in fights, not all the time, but I did get in the fights. And I was in probably one of the famous fights, the one that divided the penalty boxes with Bob Pulford against Toronto. So I can't deny that I didn't get in fights.
Oh, that's awesome. I don't want you to go through the penalty box, but that story is going to be for episode number 2, but just, he alluded to it a little bit, but at one time, there was a penalty box that both players, after there was a penalty, a fight or whatever, they shared the same space. And after Terry, Mr. Harper, and Mr. Pulford went into the penalty box, they ended up getting into a little scrap there. 10 days later, now we have individual boxes. We're going to hear the full story in episode number 2. I want to go back because this is something, we're experiencing it now, but it was different back then. And I'm just curious, the Canadian perspective to the U.S. perspective. But World War II, you were, a young kid, experienced it. I think you might have mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned that you had some family members that maybe went to the war, but we got war going on now here in the world, and we're so far removed from it. I mean, you look at the Ukraine, they used to have hockey there, and they don't now. What was your experience as a kid growing up with that type of war going on?
My family, my dad was the only one that didn't get drafted. And he didn't get drafted because he was deaf in one ear from an accident when he was a kid. But the rest of my uncles and relatives all were drafted. And in the whole, in Canada, we were all on coupons and rations with our food, especially sugar and stuff. I remember sugar and meat and things like that were all rationed. So it did affect the way we lived in a big way. And it affected my family in that, that I had three uncles and other cousins that that ended up over in Europe.
As you're growing up, we talked about that you had the ignition. You said when you're 17 years old. I hardly think that it was that late, but who would you kind of say was the most influential coach, teacher that you had that maybe said something to you that you needed it at a certain moment when no one else was saying it, but just someone that you look back on saying, if I didn't have that person in my life, I might be in a different spot?
Well, the one that had the most influence on me was Toe Blake, the coach of Montreal Canadiens. Not that I didn't have some good coaches growing up, but and one of them probably I would say was Murray Armstrong in Regina. But I didn't really play for him. I didn't make the team yet. I was too young. I was only 15, I think, but he did. And I think of another event. I had another player who was on the Regina Pats at that time, and I was too young to drive, so him and his buddy, they're both with the Pats at the time, would pick me up and take me to the practices because I didn't have a car, have a car. So, anyway, when we were training camp and playing the games that you play in training camp, he was in the corner and I checked him and after he said, "Why did you hit me? Run into me. You should knock me into the boards. You're being too." Oh my God! Changed my whole attitude. So from then on, when I went into the corner, I knocked him if I could. It made me more intense, I guess, or think that you can't just go in there and not hit the player. You gotta, if you're going to play defense, you got to check them. So that was a player. That was the coach, and the coach is the first coach that I really thought was unbelievably good was Toe Blake. I could never stop raving about him because he was just so good at making it a team effort. As I've always said, a lot of coaches, they work on a lot of different things, but his main thing was you're only as good as the player that's the weakest at that time. And he was just a master at doing that. If a player was having a slump, wasn't scoring some goals or was getting scored against or something, he'd find something good about it and rave in the newspapers about something that they did to try and get them back into their, playing the way they were capable of playing, so they wouldn't. I don't know what made him do it, but he was really good at making it a team effort.
So that, let's talk a little bit about coaching style, because, as we grow up, kids today, they're leaving their communities, there's all kinds of different models. Minnesota has a completely different one than most of North America, but, there's a lot of paths to get to where you want to go. And it just seems like there's so many players that stop playing hockey because of the experience they've had with a coach, the negativity, the ridiculing. You're telling me that you're in the NHL and you're not getting that much. You're getting team, and we're only as good as the weakest link at the moment. That's the advice you're getting in the NHL. That's amazing.
It's amazing, but what's the record of Toe Blake as a coach? was it 11 Stanley Cups or 12 or I don't know I've forgotten how many, but no, he was as a player and a coach, but he was amazing in that respect. Yeah. And, a lot of players that played for him didn't appreciate him as much as I did, I don't think. He was a bit grouchy, a bit harsh, but just a team player, a team guy. And he knew how to build a team. I don't know. I think he's amazing. And nobody else I ever played for came close to being that adept at putting it and realizing that it's a team game, and if you don't have a whole team, you're going to have a weak spot somewhere, and it's going to end up biting you with you get scored against or something at a very crucial time, but.
Everyone, I have to apologize. Coach Lance had some technical difficulties and I lost the connection with Mr. Harper, which was the reason for the abrupt halt. The good news is, I already have part 2 of the Terry Harper hockey journey scheduled and will be launched soon. You will not want to miss it. Well, that concludes another episode of the Hockey Journey podcast. I can't thank you enough for stopping by and listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing part 1 of the Terry Harper hockey journey. Next episode, we'll find out how he was part of 5 Stanley Cup championships. Lastly, if you think there's someone in your circle of family and friends that might like this episode as well, please share it with just one person. It will really help me in growing this hockey community. Again, I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, or submit a review. I hope to see you back here soon, and do me a favor, make someone close to you smile today. All the best, my friends.